Hey friends, welcome back to the Journal Feed. My name is Nick Zelt, and this is the only place to get spoon-fed the latest and greatest of emergency medicine. This is the audio version of the past week summaries, which this week were brought to you by our authors Shannon Marcus, Millie Casse, Catherine Berger, Babatund Carew, and Clay Smith. Okay, let's get straight into the first article, which was titled The Effect of Early Fluid Resuscitation on Mortality in Sepsis, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis out of the Journal of Critical Care Medicine. Now, the Surviving Sepsis Campaign recommends rapid resuscitation of people with sepsis with 30 cc's per kg. This recommendation has been met with quite a bit of pushback from people saying that you shouldn't be prescribing anybody the set amount of fluids. But what's the evidence out there really say about this? How much fluids does it seem to be evidence-based to be giving patients with sepsis? ASAP currently recommends no specific volume, but says that starting with 500 cc's to a liter is a good place to start. So these authors did a systematic review and meta-analysis. After searching all the databases, they found 30 studies, which were 3 RCTs and 27 observational trials, almost 120,000 patients. From the RCT data, so the higher quality stuff, comparing patients who were getting restrictive versus liberal strategies tended to be anywhere from 34 to 58 cc's per kg. There did not seem to be a difference in mortality. When you lump in the observational studies, then you seem to see that there does seem to be some mortality effects of giving fluids in different amounts. For example, if you give less than 20 cc's per kg, you may increase mortality. And then kind of a U-shaped curve there, if you give over 45 cc's per kg, again, this can be harmful. But among the studies, there seems to be a very wide range of what some people can get and still tolerate well. So I don't think there's necessarily a set volume for any one person or any group of people. Every patient should still be evaluated. 4 studies did find that there was an improvement in survival if you gave 30 cc's per kg within the first 3 hours. However, all of this is based on low certainty or very low certainty evidence, which is probably the biggest limitation of all this. So if you're one of the people who's very skeptical of the Surviving Sepsis Campaign's recommendation of 30 cc's per kg, know that it is probably the best recommendation that we can make of that genre based on the evidence, but you should still be evaluating your patients and having a more customized and more patient-centered approach than that, not just giving everybody 30 cc's per kg, although I know sometimes some hospitals have targets for these things and then it's out of your control. But if you just want to go from an evidentiary perspective, then it does seem to lean somewhere around 30 cc's per kg, but really every patient is going to be different. In a spoonful, the Surviving Sepsis Campaign recommendation of 30 cc's per kg as resuscitation for patients with sepsis is likely reasonable and the most evidence-based suggestion that we can really give, but the data is weak and shouldn't be a strict requirement. And then we skip to the 5th article. Azelastine nasal spray for prevention of SARS-CoV-2 infections, a phase 2 randomized clinical trial out of the JAMA Internal Medicine. Now, while we're much less worried about COVID than we used to be, COVID is still around, and it's definitely causing morbidity and mortality no matter where you look. And so we still are looking for solutions if we can do better than the vaccines that we already have, which are amazing, by the way. But if we can prevent people from getting infections who either haven't had the chance to get vaccines or don't want to get vaccines, then of course, the fewer infections, probably the better. Now, it has been thought that Azelastine, which is a second-generation H1 receptor antagonist, which is typically used as a nasal spray for allergies, well, there's some thought that this might actually have antiviral activity against COVID, RSV, and the flu. I feel like it's unlikely that this has specific antiviral properties against viral proteins, but in some lab assays, it seems that there is a signal towards this. So, what these authors wanted to do was try to use it in a phase 2 double-blinded placebo-controlled trial of 450 healthy adults to see if giving Azelastine nasal spray to these patients 3 times a day for 56 days was going to have them be at a lower risk of COVID, and they were tested twice a week with rapid antigen testing. Now, what they found was that indeed there was less COVID when you were taking this nasal spray, 2.2% against 6.7%. That's actually an odds ratio of 0.31 for detecting these COVID infections. As well, these patients who actually got sick with COVID recovered faster if they were using this nasal spray. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty skeptical of all of this. First of all, of course, you're going to feel like you recovered more quickly if you're taking a treatment for viral symptoms. That one I'm not going to care that much about. But in terms of actually getting the COVID, I don't know. I'd suspect less blood flow, maybe more stress response because less blood in your nose really chronically at this point for almost 2 months. Maybe those cells are better for fending off viruses because they're kind of stressed, or maybe there's just less mucus, less movement of mucus in your nose, so it's harder for the virus to penetrate. Or is the test just less reliable because you're constantly using this nasal spray and so you just have less mucus to get a good test from? That's another possibility, which is a pretty distinct possibility. They did not robustly look at serology levels in this population. It was optional and they were not doing a standard pre-post, so it's hard to tell if we might have measured differences in the amount of COVID if we had tried to measure it in different ways. There was also less occurrences of rhinovirus, so maybe it really is just that we're seeing less mucus, less signs of these viruses. It's harder to test because it seems unlikely that this treatment would have specific antiviral properties against multiple very different types of viruses. And if the cure or prevention of the common cold is to just constantly take treatment for common cold symptoms, then this seems, I guess it seems kind of silly. Also, these were all healthy volunteers, so maybe it would be different in a different population. Overall, this is very interesting data, but to me it seems very cumbersome to take a nasal spray 3 times a day for months on end just for the possibility that I might get COVID. Though a number needed to treat of 22, it's not the worst, and if you are high risk, maybe it would actually be, maybe it would be worth it. Though other limitations would include a small sample size, a single center design, the low event rate of COVID, and potential unblinding. I don't know if these patients were able to know that they were having an active ingredient or not. So while this is interesting, it's definitely going to require further study, and I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of it just from this one trial. We're going to need more data on this. In a spoonful, this trial reports that pre-exposure prophylaxis for COVID in the form of a nasal decongestant did seem to be effective at decreasing COVID infection rates, with the number needed to treat of 22. However, you do have to use this nasal spray 3 times. All right, that's all the articles from this week. Let's do a quick wrap-up of everything we talked about. From the first article, the 30 cc's per kg within 3 hours of bolus for sepsis patients, well, it does seem to be the most evidence-based thing that we can recommend, but it's by no means a slam dunk. And then from the fifth and last article, I think I'd be more annoyed by having to take a nasal spray TID for months at a time rather than a mild COVID infection. But you can take your pick. The number needed to treat for Azelastine nasal decongestant spray for the pre-exposure prophylaxis of COVID was 22. All right, if you're hearing this right now, then you are not a part of the members feed. What's up, guys? You missed 3 articles from this past week that you could have gotten summarized on this podcast. What'd you miss? Well, we talked about the 1-bag versus 2-bag method for DKA. We talked about how much of a blood pressure decrease you might actually see if you're giving loop diuretics to patients with acute decompensated heart failure. And then what is your best vasopressor for giving in the post-ROSC hypotensive patient? Is it epi or norepi? Links to all the original articles can be found at journalfeed.org or just follow the links in your show notes. Our goal here is for you to keep up the easy way, 1 spoonful at a time. Thank you.